So we're going to look at the Wheel of Fortune card, which is card 10 of the Major Arcana of the Tarot. The Wheel of Fortune card is, being a 10, it represents a completion, a whole cycle being completed in a way, in a divinatory sense. Tens represent completion. So it's one of the only Major Arcana cards in the Rider-Waite deck that we don't actually see like a person, a guy, as the archetype, right? It's the wheel the wheel is the archetype. So it's a little different from how a lot of the other Major Arcana cards look in a traditional Rider deck. I'll show you some other decks too, so you have different ideas of what different artists do to represent this archetype. Essentially, in many of the more traditional decks, you'll see this in the Marseille, the Worth, the Old English, a lot of the older decks, you'll see the same idea of a wheel with either people or animals on it. Very often, they're interpreted as, monkeys. You see on the Marseille Tarot, you see them as monkeys. And we get this idea of sort of our lower selves, our self that is attached to outcome, that isn't coming from a place of non-attachment, being monkey-like in a sort of a symbolic sense. And so the monkey gets attached to where on the wheel he is, whether he's at the top of his game, on top of the wheel, or whether he's coming up, or whether he's having a fall, or whether he's down at the bottom. We get this sense in this card that, the outer ego, the self, is the thing spinning around on this wheel. But really and truly, that's just sort of a happenstance location in life that we have. It doesn't really speak to our true nature, our true character. So, some cards that really do that well with less traditional symbolism. I think, one of my favorites is the Osho Zen interpretation. You see the wheel here is like this cosmic mandala. You see this spinning cosmos, and in the center, you've got sort of I Ching symbols here, and you've got astrological symbols around the outside of the mandala, along with some, beautiful colors. You've got the four directions interpreted here with like lightning and storms going on. So everything around here is very active and spinning, but in the very center of the wheel, of course, we have this yin-yang symbol, the symbol of, quiet. Everything's very quiet in the center of the wheel. And they've renamed this card Change, which I think is a great divinatory interpretation of this archetype. So the idea of change, the only constant in life is change, but where can you find your center in the midst of all of this change? Where is your center? So that's one way of interpreting the card. Another way of interpreting the card is fate, obviously, the word fortune being in the card. Fate, coming into play, which is an older concept, and you can play with, I like many of us now, believe that we create our own fate, in a way. But of course, the more the more traditional in the West way of viewing the fates were as these women from Greek mythology, the fates. And so here on the Mythic Tarot, we see the fates represented spinning, on the spinning wheel that's spinning the tapestry of life. We see little guys falling around the wheel, right? Their fates are being determined by the fates, who are these sort of cosmic spinners of the fabric of the universe. This is the Mythic Tarot again. We see that represented on many different decks. One that has taken that into more of a tribal interpretation is this card, Life Weaver, Spider Woman. And she is represented on the variation of the Wheel of Fortune card from the Daughters of the Moon Tarot. We see her spinning wheel over here again, but spider webs kind of as the symbol around her. But again, a weaver of life, Life Weaver. Another way of looking at the wheel as the number 10, going with the number and the symbology of the number, is 10 represents completion. And so we can often interpret the wheel also as, well, now you're reaping what you sowed. It's sort of a karmic thing, reaping what you sowed, or harvest. And that's how the Medicine Woman Tarot has interpreted the card of the wheel. They've interpreted it as harvest. So we have this sort of culmination of the year's work coming in a divinatory meaning for the wheel. You are now reaping what you have sown. Yeah, so that idea is also alive and well in this archetype. This is just a fun variation of the wheel, Alice in Wonderland on a merry-go-round. So they've called the card Alice in Wonderland in the Inner Child Tarot, which I think is quite fun. But you get the sense here of this, again, this spinning merry-go-round that really could be quite meaningless at the end of the day. She's going through this crazy world, and she's coming out at the end of it with a new sense of who she is. But all of the stuff that happens to her in the world is kind of crazy and nutty, like this merry-go-round ride. So it does speak to something that the wheel is trying to say. I'm going to delve just a little bit into the symbols on the wheel. You don't really need them to interpret the card from a divinatory sense. If you're more interested in actually looking at the symbols on the cards themselves, my training on virtualtarotschool.com goes much more in depth, but I just in this training wanted to give you a very succinct divinatory meaning for the card. But just to go there a little bit, you see the 4 symbols, 4 Hebrew letters around the edge of the wheel here. These are the 4 Hebrew letters in the Tetragrammaton, which is the name of the 4-lettered word of God in Hebrew. It comes into play a lot in Kabbalah. The symbols in the center here are alchemical symbols, like elemental alchemical symbols, and then we have the letters T-A-R-O, tarot, obviously, but you can play with those, right? It can be tarot, or it can be rota, or ator, or orat, right? So there's 4 words you can make there: tarot, rota, ator, orat, and you can kind of form those in a sentence that basically translates to the path of tarot speaks of universal wisdom. Like, you can interpret it that way, and lots of books go into that. I go into that in my training a little bit too. And then around the edges you have the 4 symbols of the visions of Ezekiel. We've got the angel, the eagle, the bull, and the lion. So there's way more that you can read into this card, for sure, if you really want to look at the symbols. But for a basic divinatory meeting, cycles of life, change, finding your center in craziness, or harvesting and completion. Those are basic divinatory meanings for the card. So I hope you enjoyed my mini training on the Major Arcana card, and you can go to my website www.virtualtarotschool.com to receive 21 other trainings just like this one. All you have to do is visit the website and it'll show you how to do that from there. I hope to see you on virtualtarotschool.com.